And joining us right now on the program, the Cardinals Hall of Fame manager, Tony La Russa, with us. Great to see him in Cooperstown recently with the Scott Rowland induction. Tony, it's been a minute since I've talked to you. Great to have you on the show. How are you?
Well, I'm looking forward to, I got that health thing finally fixed. It was long, like 11 months, but the doctors had always told me we're going to get you ready to get to Cooperstown, and that also includes like to be in St. Louis this coming weekend.
Wow, outstanding. How have you battled? I know you've been pretty private about it, but how have you tackled this battle?
Well, it's just that I wanted to be private. I didn't think even all my teammates, they don't know. They knew it was a cancer, but they don't know what cancer. Other than Elaine, the girls, and Mr. Reinsdorf, they just kind of just wanted to keep it private. Just you did treatment, had a couple surgeries, and modern medicine's amazing, and right now I'm cancer free.
Oh, that's outstanding. And you're a guy who's been in competition his whole life. I mean, was there any part of it that's intimidating when it's your own personal health? I mean, how did you mentally approach it?
We've always talked about you control your mind, don't you? Yeah. In the end, don't make any excuses. If you challenge yourself, it's amazing the strengths, your attributes that'll come in and help you. And in this case, when you get a health thing, I just refused to give in, refused to give up, and I believed that from what they told me, if I followed the process, I would get well. So, but I'm a big believer in self accountability, and if you talk about that, you talk about that to the players, you better do it yourself.
How many people did you hear from throughout? Like, I'm sure, you got a full Rolodex already, and whether it's Hollywood or rock stars or former players, and how many, was it constant?
Yeah, that was I had a lot of, it was tough, and I'm not, trying to minimize going through it. It wouldn't, in fact, they call me the impatient patient, but one of the things that was amazing was the response from, the people that I know, where they were friends. A lot of them in the sporting world, different sports, but a lot of the keys were teammates. When you manage for 30 years, I got some stuff. Just the warmth and the caring. Really makes you emotional and appreciative. We always taught family, and the family came through to get me through it.
Well, it's interesting to have you on. Recently talked to Gary Pinkel, the former Missouri coach and football coach, and he had been at a practice with the Chiefs, and he's friends with Andy Reid, and he said, I'm on the sideline, and he said, I've been out of coaching for 8 years, and he said, it was the first time I just said to myself, gosh, I wish I was wearing a headset or doing that. And I'm wondering, over the years, because you were out for a while before you came back with the Sox, and you had different jobs, different roles along the way. Was there a time in your, quote, managerial retirement where you had that kind of moment?
Well, I was fortunate, very fortunate, that the day I retired, Commissioner Seelig said, look, we'd like you to be a part of Major League and do some assignments. So I think when I did come back in 21, or during the winter of 20, probably the one disagreement I had with it, so we've been out of touch. Well, really, I wasn't. I had stayed with the commissioner, then I went with Diamondbacks, and I was in Boston 18 and 19 when they had that great year. In 18, I was kind of an advisor, and my advice was, you guys are really good. I didn't do anything else. And I was 1 year during pandemics with Artie Moreno in California. I really regretted that because I have such respect for him and that organization. But I stayed close to it, and the one thing that I've learned is the front office job is, if somebody's got longevity there, you really work hard. It's more of a year-round job than if you're in a uniform. But the most difficult part is once the game starts, you are totally at the mercy of what goes on downstairs. So, if you have good coaching and good players, and it's really tough because you live and die like you do downstairs, but it's even more personal. So I thought I'd had enough. But, you miss the action. There's something about being down in that dugout close to the action. It's really invigorating, and you feel the competition, that closer. You're closer to it. So when Jerry asked me to come back in 21, the timing was right, and we ended up having a good year. The next year wasn't so good.
Yeah, and you guys won the division that first year. Tell me about that conversation. Does Jerry call you and surprise you, or does he text you? How did he offer you the job?
Well, we've remained friends, and my friends. You think from 2012 to through to 20, so that was like 8 or 9 years, right? I had talked a lot with people that I talked to all the time, and I had made that comment about, like I worked with Dave Duncan in Boston, and we both started at the same time in 1978. My first year managing Double-A for the White Sox, he came on out of college and became assistant farm director. So we've known each other forever. And I've told him and others that I was really, feeling fortunate to be close to the game, but it's really difficult upstairs, and you want to be back in the action, And so when Jerry came back with it, I never thought I would get the opportunity, but it was, they had talent and they had an opportunity to win, and I jumped at it.
What was fair in terms of the critique, and what did you think was unfair? Because some people said, well, he's been out too long, or he's too old to do this. How much were you aware of the critique, even before you stepped in there for the first time?
Well, I think I thought there was most of the people that were questioning were right. You out of sync with the modern player. The freedom of expression, all that stuff. Old school, too old school, all that stuff. I thought that was, definitely reasonable to question. Being away from the game, people, nobody lives and breathes with me, so they didn't know how close I stay with the game. I think the biggest net detriment, and there's nobody blaming myself, but about the time that I signed, that second DUI came up. I'd had one in 2007 when I was with the Cardinals, and then that came up again, and a second mistake, and the timing was awful. But I put the organization in a tough spot, and I was ready to walk away, but they said no. But I think that the questions about whether I could relate to the players were legitimate, whether the game had passed me by, all that, and I was anxious to prove that it's just like what's happening with Snitker and in Atlanta, and I see veteran managers, Torrey, he was what he did when he was at the Yankees. It's just if you learned how to relate and create an environment where players commit to a team and earning mutual trust and respect, that doesn't go away. So actually, that one of the highest moments when we won the division, the comments that were coming from Tim Anderson and Abreu and guys were about what a family situation we had and the love between. It was just invigorating. And then it got away from us the next year for whatever. And one of the things you learn, Martin, is, and I try not to do it, when you try to explain, it comes off as excuses. So I don't make any excuses. You are what your record was, and it wasn't good.
Well, so you're saying after the Arizona DUI, you said to Jerry, hey, if you don't want to stick with this. So he basically said, you're my guy. We're getting through this?
Yeah. Well, it happened the spring that I was with 220 or so. I was with Mr. Moreno, and I told him, he said, no, we'll get through it. So that it went through the process and wasn't public until literally about the time that I signed, which the timing couldn't have been worse.
And you talk about 21, that's a team that wins a division. You're in the playoffs. You run up against Houston. It happens. You know that from being around the game forever. These playoffs are random, but this team has fallen off since then, and I'm not saying vindication. I'm sure you're rooting for the Sox, but do you think maybe some of the people are like, get him out of here. He was too old, and no wonder the team – and because the team hasn't really – it's not like they took off when you left. How do you view that?
Well, I try not to pay attention. I know that, for half a season now, there's been some comment about, hey, maybe he wasn't as bad or something, whatever. But it's not important. I think there were expectations for the 22 season, and when you don't meet them, you're going to catch the heat. And here again, when you try to explain what was going on, it comes off as excuses. As it turned out, most of the things being said. Now, I was sick and didn't know it. And did that affect? I don't think it affected my leadership, but people are looking at it now. I just think that the most important part was you need to learn. When you walk into a situation, whether it was St. Louis in '96, you need to learn the type of persons that are your teammates, and then what their baseball skills are, or whether they need, what they're strong on, or whether not, and that is the scariest part of walking in a new situation because you got to learn it, and that's what I was concerned about. But we all got off to a good start, and I think we won 93 games or something. So got through it, and we built a really good culture, and that's the one that upsets me the most because now this year they're talking about culture not being good, and they were questioning our culture in 22. Well, we got it done in 21, but it's not automatic for the carryover year to year. So, I talked to Jim Leland. The reason I didn't answer the phone when you first called, I was talking to Jim. Jim Leland could manage today, and I still think he's the best manager of our generation. And that knowledge and those skills that you have to relate to people, and then, in fact, I do believe that it's starting to be better now with the no shifting, and you got to play the whole game. You just can't swing from your butt and try to hit home runs and win consistently. I think people that have a background in being taught and what the basics are, like a George Kissel kind of education that a lot of us had. I came from the A's where it was that way in the minor leagues when I was a player, and as a manager I had Carl Keel, Keith Flipman. That stuff is more valuable now, and the way I'd leave it, Martin, is there is a wonderful, important place for metrics and information, and there is a wonderful place where it needs to stop, and you get traditional with watching the game that day and making sure that your manager and coaches are empowered to lead and adjust and teach.
Well, I think a good example the other night, the Phillies, Michael Lorenzen goes 124 pitches, and Rob Thompson's like, hey, he looked good, he felt good, like he's got a no-hitter going. I mean, some of this is just, it's gotten out of hand, and I think for you and your tenure here with Dave Duncan, that big old crazy-ass notebook, folder, binder, that was analytics right there, right? I mean, analytics is just information. It was just a different way of, dispensing it.
Well, you can't. I couldn't begin to describe it enough because it's impossible how great Dave Duncan is, but you just hit one of them. He devoured information. And the thing is that he created a lot of it. He knew what he wanted, so he would spend 2 or 3 hours the next day inputting the chart that was meticulously kept by Chad Blair off of the TV, and then he would input that into his book and then evaluate how you attack this hitter, what the hot spot is, and then he would translate that into, Martin, these are the 2 or 3 pitches he does well, and Tony, this is what, Duncan was amazing, but it was all based on information. That's what we all laughed at. Our coaching staff was famous for it. I'm going back to, the Chicago and Oakland days. We wanted information. That's why it's, I feel like, I can speak about it because we value it, but I can also speak to, if there's a use and an abuse, and it's gone way too far. It's just not fantasy baseball.
You and Dave ever argue in the dugout? Like he's done. You're like, he's not done. He's done. Or go to him. Bring in the lefty. No, bring in the righty. How often, or did you defer mostly?
That's a great question because Dunk was the first to correct it. Dunk was totally involved, was watching his pitcher, and he worked diligently with the catcher, right? He didn't call. I often asked, "Hey, did you guys call pitches from the bench?" And the thing was, Dave prepared the pitcher and the catcher, just perfectly every day. Well, he also told the catcher, because the catcher is watching all the little stuff that goes on with where the hitter moves. He's watching stuff as it comes in where the guy has. But Dave also always said, if you ever get stuck, just look over and Dave will give you a pitch, right? So Dave was so engrossed with that the other side of the game, the momentum and all that, he always felt very comfortable with me making that decision. And what I would do, obviously, I would say, it looks like looks like he's got something left, and Dave would agree, or I think he's getting tired, and Dave would disagree, or whatever. We never really argued, and Dave, in fact, teams tried to take Dave away from our teams, giving him an expanded role, and he said, no, that's not the role of the pitching coach, that's the role of the manager. And so our wives, who are very close friends, said, this is the most unique marriage around, because Dave and I never really argued. We had such respect for each other. Whatever differences, man, we were. In fact, I talked to him 2 or 3 times a week. He was worth hundreds of wins to our team.
I'm wondering at the end, did you have Steve Carlton at the end of his career with the Sox? And I'm bringing this up because Adam Wainwright is in his final couple of months here with the Cardinals. He said this is it. He's really struggling. And I think nobody really knows how to go about it. He'd love to get to 200 career wins. He's 2 away. The numbers have been bad. It's hard to watch. I'm trying to remember, did Carlton struggle at the end when you had him?
Yeah, we got him at the end there, and he pitched just a little bit. I watch Adam as much as I can. It's hard because I don't, I have to watch the White Sox too. But I don't know how much of it is him pressing, because I don't care who you are, if you press, he was always he is a great competitor, and he's trying his best. And if he tries a little harder, then it's not going to be good for you, But what he throws, he still makes pitches, but he's not getting away with much. And I just hope that he can relax and pitch with what he's got and not try to get some extra.
How much do you think a team misses Molina, not just leadership? You talked about it from day one, but in terms of the command of the game and knowing when a pitcher needs to do this, that, how often did he just, I'm not going to say he runs the show because that's unfair to everybody else involved, but how I feel like we maybe, as much as we talked about the legend of Yadi when he was here, I think this season has really reminded people he covered a lot of ground, man, in terms of running this pitching show.
Well, that's a question like that, Martin. I got to be careful with, because the more you praise Yadi, then it disrespect. We had Mike Matheny for 5 years, and we did a great job. But Yadier, based on his upbringing in Puerto Rico as a baby, being around baseball, and had 2 brothers as catchers. His father was a brilliant baseball man. Yadier has a long-standing gut that's filled with experiences and smarts. And I do believe, if you think about the 06 and 11 championships, especially with our bullpens, Yadier's brilliance, and then you remember now, he's preparing every day with Dave Duncan, and when the inning is over, they come in, they talk. So these 2 great minds, were difference makers, and out of respect for Yadi, I don't care how good the people are now. It's going to be less because he's gone, and I think Albert coming in that last year, and Wainwright, the team leadership, it has been a struggle. They're lucky because they got Goldie and Arenado, and they're 2 great pros, but you got to pitch, man. You got to stop the other club before you have to start scoring runs.
You'd love this story, because Mike Matheny was on this show about 2 months ago, and he said every year, whether it was the Brewers, the Blue Jays, he said there was always somebody taking his job. There's always, and he would come home and tell his wife, they got another kid coming for me. He said one day in Jupiter, he went home and said to Kristen, he said, this kid's taking my job, and his name's Molina. He said, they always said, we're going to find a guy. Well, he said, I finally said, this is the guy. You reference it there, and I'm curious, just seeing the Cardinals franchise struggle. It's been a long time, and I know you're not watching every game, but how strange is to look and see in St. Louis in last place in the division?
Yeah. Well, it's. I'll step back a second. That story, that comment about Mike is so typical. Mike was an outstanding catcher, teammate, competitor, and slightly more outstanding person. And he's one of the, I remember the old story. I wanted him to marry both my daughters, what he and Kristen did. But, and that family and their kids, that's why I'm careful complimenting Yadi, because I don't want it ever to reflect. Mike, he was one of the, in 2000, he was one of the guys that changed the team around. That's when we started winning. We had people like Mike that were so committed to to competing and being respectful. Watching now, when you have expectations, it's just like the 22 White Sox, right? When you have expectations and you got a rabid fandom and the expectations are not made, there's going to be a lot of heat. And I'm not around to see how the heat has been handled, manager-wise, coaches-wise, front office-wise. But, you can't avoid it, and that comes with expectations. And if it bothers you, you got to do something else for a living. But, I do think that in the end, what do? You evaluate, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What do we need to improve? And then you go from there.
Well, and the reason I wanted to have you on, not only to check and see how your health is and get the latest update, but I was filling in with Julie Buck, and we had Carol on the show. And Carol Buck, she got a new home phone, and she said to Julie, well, make sure Tony has the new number, okay? People don't realize you, Carol, Jack Buck, when you first got here, that was sort of your crew, wasn't it, in terms of getting to know St. Louis? And you couldn't have a better ambassador than Jack and Carol.
Well, it came down to Jack and Mike. They pulled me aside, and then, of course, one of the big advantages. There's Stan and Red and Gibby and Brock. They'll pull you aside and say, "Hey, do you know what this is? You know what's expected here?" And sometimes they put their fingers around your neck, and it was very persuasive. But personally, Jack and Carol knew that my family was in California, and they started the afternoon game knowing that I was by myself because my coaches had family, and I got invited to go to dinner with them, and they became two of the best friends ever. And the most fascinating nights of my life came being around Jack and that crew, and I love Carol dearly, and I don't have that home phone, so Julie better give it to me.
We will pass that number along. You mentioned you'll be back in town. We'll finish with that thought. I know opening day, I think Mr. DeWitt offered to send you a plane. You weren't able to make it for health reasons. You're coming back. How hard was it to miss opening day? And again, you'll have a chance to see the fans this weekend, but I know that was a tough one for you.
That was close, and I can't give Bill enough credit because I had just gotten clear to start doing a little traveling. But if I had to do a commercial over and back and quickly, it would have beaten me up. And he volunteered to have a private plane. You know how expensive that is. It blew me away, and it was so difficult to pass on that. As it turned out, just a few days after that, I got this one infection and put me back in the hospital. So it's a good thing I didn't go. But I really appreciated the gesture by the DeWitt family and Bill in particular. And I wanted to be there for because we've lost so many great ones. I wanted to make sure that I was there, and now I get my chance to come back in a long time this weekend. And I will say this, so the fans know, I had several communication with David Freese, and I told him that I supported. I'm disappointed because I think the fans voted for him because they wanted to honor it, and we wouldn't have won without him. But I support. He's such a great person, and has grown so much in his life and with his family that we'll miss him. And I hope at some point he changes his mind. But our fans, just be patient, and hopefully we'll get him in that Hall of Fame sooner rather than later.
And if it tells you anything you need to know about the guy, the integrity, to say, I don't belong, I mean, you belong more when you say it, something like that, because of the integrity. And I kind of get it, though. He's saying, hey, Matt Holliday's my best buddy. Look at his career compared to mine. But it's a special chapter, there's no doubt. And I think the DeWitts feel like it's the fans' choice, and the fans want him in. So maybe I'm not sure where I fall on this one because I can see both sides of it. But I think ultimately it's his call.
Well, yeah, explain to me. I was on a committee that put him on the ballot. Yeah. And the thing that you understand, he's right. Normally there's a certain longevity, like, in the big leagues. If you don't have something around 12, 15 years of excellence, you're not going to make it. Well, the way we always figured it with the Cardinals, it's got to be 5, 6, 7 years. And David didn't feel that, and we tried to explain though, when there's something that's so spectacular, and it brings such joy, like a world championship, to the fans as a reward and to the organization, that's historic, and that was a qualification. But he didn't feel that he wanted that longevity thing, and like I say, I love him, and I respect him, and I ended up telling him, I says, whatever you decide, I support. I just want you to understand that the reason we put you on that ballot is, and in fact, the last thing I told him, and he said he would do it. I said, don't you ever not appreciate the greatness of what you did that to get us into the playoffs, and your performance is, Milwaukee in the World Series was, why you deserved to wear that red jacket sometime.
Well, Tony, we appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you at Busch Stadium this week, and I think fans are going to be excited to not only know you'll be back in town, but to hear you're feeling better. I think your text to me would be on the mend, and it sounds like you've taken this thing head on. And so, again, thanks for your time.
Yeah, well, it's going to be great to see, to be around the fans, the organization, and not just the Red Jackets, but anybody that's part of the organization. So thank you.